we'll touch on Alabama and Clemson in a little bit. First up, in the East region, number one seeded and the number one overall seed in the tournament, UConn, an 8.5-point favorite as we record this on Friday afternoon against the third seeded Fighting Illini. Total of 155. Total has dipped down a bit. And I saw the initial opener for this game was UConn minus 7.5. And that was like a soft opener at DraftKings. And then the line kind of shot up and surfaced 8.5 pretty much everywhere else. And one bookmaker I saw being quoted saying it's pretty much one-way traffic on UConn. That's what they expect, and that's why they kind of inflated the number to an extent. I'm not saying ballooned it, and the number should be 4, but still, I think you can make the case that it's a bit inflated, and I'll touch on my reasoning here in a bit. But kind of looking at the pace, I think, Mike, both games are going to be a battle of tempo. UConn wants to play at a slower pace, even though they're elite in transition in their own right offensively. Illinois, the exact opposite. They don't want to generate turnovers and speed you up defensively, but they do want to push the pace when they have the possessions. And Terrence Shannon did make some big defensive plays in his own right yesterday. And the Huskies, by the way, rank in the 56th percentile of percentage of points allowed in transition in Big East play. So transition defense maybe can be had. Haslametrics, our partner, makes this game UConn minus 5.5-ish. So, kind of off in terms of what the number is in the betting market. I make this closer to UConn minus 6, minus 6.5. Mike, what do you make of this game?
I think when you talk about the transition defense, a lot of that is a direct result of how much they want to crash the offensive glass. UConn, one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the country. I wonder if they kind of tweak that just a little bit because Terrence Shannon is so good in transition and gets so many of his points, going downhill and getting off on the break, off of missed shots. I do wonder if Danny Hurley says, all right, we don't need to crash 5. Maybe we just crash 3 because we've got a little bit more size than them inside. We can still take advantage and get those second chance opportunities while also taking an extra step to be aware of Terrence Shannon in transition and not letting them get points that way. Because I think Hurley believes, and probably rightly so, if they can make this a half-court game, they're going to win, and they're going to win handily. They're the better half-court team. There's no question about it. They can get out and run if they want to, but in this game, I feel like if they can get Illinois into their sets and trying to have to run that half-court offense, they're probably going to win this game. These are the top 2 offensive teams in the country in terms of efficiency. I think Illinois was number 1 going into last night. UConn passed them because of how good they were against SDSU. So, different styles, but still very, very good at what they do. I think that Illinois has got a little bit of, Coleman Hawkins is going to have to step up, and he's been a little bit erratic at times. Marcus Domask has been fantastic in this tournament, had the triple-double in the first round. He's going to have to be at his best. They're going to have to try to exploit UConn inside, which is not an easy thing to do. I mean, you look at UConn and you look for sort of holes, and there aren't that many. They're just rock solid every single level, and I think Illinois will probably try to make it a game where they get a ton of points in transition, and when they are in the half court, they will try to exploit UConn in the paint a little bit. And I don't know if that's going to work. I just think every time I talk about a Connecticut game, it always goes back to the same point, which I think UConn is just too good. I can't pick against them. They may get beat this tournament. I'll have to see it to believe it, just because I've watched them a ton this year, and there's way more to like than there is to nitpick. And I think that the same holds true for this game.
And when Illinois does want to get in transition, Terrence Shannon has been incredible last night, even on the defensive end, a couple big steals down the stretch, like I mentioned, against Iowa State. He scored 246 points in March, the most of any player in March since Kemba Walker and Jimmer Fredette. So yeah, it's comparable. We've been waiting for a comparable star to at least Kemba, and we may have gotten one in Shannon, even though maybe he's not as good of a pure shooter as either of those guys. Kind of highlighting this for a second before I give my points on UConn, Illinois. Shannon's growth as a playmaker and just as a pure scorer, he didn't take games over like this, A, at Texas Tech for sure, and B, last year. He kind of was hesitant down the stretch of games, and it didn't have definitely this killer instinct that we're seeing, let alone the ability to finish like he does in the open floor.
No, I mean, he was sensational in the Big Ten tournament, and you kind of were like, okay, that's one thing, cool. But the NCAA tournament, 26 points or more in all 3 games. He's shooting the ball well from the outside, which opens up a lot of different things for him. 4 of 10 from 3 last night. He was 2 of 5 against Duquesne. 3 of 9 against Morehead State, but a lot of those were taken when they'd kind of pulled away. And he shot the ball 50% or better from 3 in 2 of their 3 games in the Big Ten tournament. So I think that's a huge thing for him. When you can't just back off him, if you have to press up on him, he's going to go right around you. And he's big enough, and he's physical enough, and he's athletic enough to finish from just about every spot on the floor. He's a 3-level scorer. But you're right. He's kind of, this is the first time where we've seen him really develop that killer instinct where he wants to just to crush you. If he makes a couple of shots in a row, he wants the ball every single possession. It's something that we have not seen from Shannon throughout his career. He's become more of a consistent talent. He's always had the skill. He's always been a guy that you look at and you're like, damn, if he could just put it all together, he could be one of the best players in the entire country. He could be an elite pro prospect. The skill set has always been there, but just for whatever reason, you see this every now and then where a guy just hits his stride at this point in his college career and it doesn't turn off. And it seems like Shannon, I fully expect him to play well against Connecticut. I think UConn will devote more attention to him than some teams have, and they have more tools to slow him down a little bit. And I think that if Illinois gets beat in this game, it's not going to be because he just has a 4 for 18 clunker. I expect him to play really well in this game because he's been rock solid for the last 5-6 weeks, really the whole season.
And that's the question mark for me off the bat is, like you alluded to, if UConn keeps this game in the half court, they probably cover the number more often than not if the possessions are in the half court at both ends of the floor. Stephon Castle against Terrence Shannon Jr. We've seen Castle shut down the opponent's best player. Boo Booey, I'm not considering him to be like a Terrence level-esque player, but Castle did shut him down in the round of 32, did a great job on some of San Diego State's shooters last night, including Lamont Butler in the half court. So I don't think anybody is stopping Shannon when he gets in the open floor, especially with an odd man break. But if this game is played more so in the half court, Castle has proven more often than not that he can shadow a player like Terrence Shannon Jr. and maybe hold them to 5 of 15, 4 of 12, something like that from the field. By the way, if Illinois does start coughing the ball up, that's a little bit of a question mark with San Diego State. Only 12 turnovers, but UConn capitalizing with 20 points off of turnovers in the Sweet 16. So selectively pushing the pace in transition and also finishing in the half court off of those turnovers. The one area where I think Illinois can give UConn problems, among some smaller ones, but the biggest one is if Coleman Hawkins can pull Donovan Clingan out of the paint and Illinois starts hitting some of those mid-range shots with UConn being in drop coverage. Like I was looking at the efficiency numbers for Illinois in the mid-range. UConn A, running you off the three-point line. They're allowing a bottom 50 opponent's three-point attempt rate. And then you look at mid-range efficiency and mid-range attempt rate, opponents rank in the 18th percentile in that regard and 17th percentile when it comes to mid-range efficiency. Damask, who you brought up, to me is going to be the key to exploiting UConn's drop coverage. 74th percentile in mid-range efficiency. Shannon just above average. Hawkins, I think 47th percentile, so just below average. And then everybody else on Illinois, considering they don't really have a true point guard, is well below average. So would you agree that even though Shannon is kind of getting the limelight here in the spotlight, that it's Damask, he's going to have the big game, especially against Clingan's drop coverage, in order for Illinois to keep this one close?
100%. I mean, I think they're also going to have to rely on Dane Danger coming off the bench and playing big-time minutes again. He's a big, physical, imposing presence who can help you out in this game against a team that has a ton of big, physical, imposing presences. But Hawkins is the guy, and this it's like this is one of those scenarios where you lay out, if Hawkins can do this, then Clingan has to do this and all this stuff. And you just hope that Hawkins doesn't come out there and get 2 quick whistles, because that could absolutely happen. Or Clingan could go out there and get 2 quick whistles. But it does seem like that's the one area that you look at and you try to say, outside of, getting cheap points in transition, because UConn, like you mentioned, is not a great transition defense team. Outside of that, if you do get in the half court, I think you've got to pull Clingan away, and you've got to use that super skill and athleticism that you have with guys that maybe are a little bit smaller but a little bit quicker than UConn's front court players. I like Stephon Castle. I like what you say. He's a guy who's really emerged as a potential lottery pick as this season has gone on, really come into his own. And a lot of times you see the potential, like watching Colorado play in this tournament with Cody Williams, but he's like the third or fourth best player on Colorado, and it's more about potential with the draft stock. With Castle, he's become a really good college basketball player as this season has gone on. Like, he's doing things that fit the college game while also showcasing his next level skill set. And he is one of those guys that you look at and you're like, he's got the skills and the athleticism and the size a little bit to match up fairly well with Terrence Shannon and keep him from going off. Again, if they can keep them into those half-court situations. But yeah, if I'm Illinois, I'm pulling Klingon away. I'm trying to get ISO sets with Shannon where maybe there's not that rim protector there. But Hawkins is going to have to make Klingon respect the jump shot and respect the second level of that three-part game if they're going to make that happen. And he's inconsistent when it comes to stuff like that throughout his career.
Hit a big three in the second half, a couple of them for that matter, but right. And he can get hot-headed, so hopefully for anybody looking to bet Illinois, he doesn't get teed up. But looking at UConn offensively at the other end of the court, top 135 in three-point scoring rate. Illinois runs you off the three-point line. I think they're allowing a bottom 20, bottom 30 three-point attempt rate in college basketball. Now, UConn can hit those mid-range shots, and I'm not saying this is an exact comparison in terms of the final outcome of the game. Illinois is, even if they win the game, even if they cover, this isn't going to be an Illinois by double-digit kind of final margin of victory. But I go back to the Creighton-UConn game when those two teams matched up in Omaha the second time around, and McDermott adjusted by kind of bowling through those ball screens and not allowing UConn to shoot threes, so running them off the three-point line in that game as well. And that allowed Creighton to get out in transition when they got those UConn misses in the mid-range. Now, we've seen Cam Spencer exploit drop coverage in his own right this year, but Illinois' defense doesn't match up terribly if they can hard hedge and get some of those misses in the mid-range and then leak out.
It doesn't. They've not been a great defensive team. I think they're they're on the lower end of the great offense, okay defense spectrum for these teams that are remaining, depending on which efficiency metrics you're looking at. But they could be better. Like when you look at the tools that they have at their disposal, like there's no real reason for them to be, around the 100s or just inside the 100s in adjusted defensive efficiency. They've got the size, the skills, the athleticism to be much, much better on that end of the floor. And you're right, like they will run UConn off that three-point line. I'm not sure that's going to matter. I think UConn can adjust well to that. Like guys like Cam Spencer seems to make the right decisions in those situations whenever he's playing. He's matured in that regard. He's not mature in every regard, but he's matured in that regard for sure. And I think you can say the same thing about Alex Carabin and certainly Tristan Newton, who always seems to make the right play at the right time after, this time a year ago being kind of the question mark of this team, which seems hilarious in hindsight because he always makes the right play. Castle has grown as the season has gone on. He's another guy who I think can hurt you going to the basket or hurt you taking up and hitting a little 12-foot jumper. So it's the right game plan to have if you're Illinois. I think it gives you the best chance. I'm just not sure that it's going to work because, again, like it all goes back to the same place. UConn is just too good. For every single chess move you have, they seem to be a couple of moves ahead of you.
I think I found a box score as you were going on there, and if let's say UConn is off from three, maybe a little bit off in the mid range. I remember and looking at this from 2018 when Villanova knocked off Texas Tech in the Elite Eight. That was one of my favorite college basketball teams with Keenan Evans the year before they made it to the national championship game. And I think Texas Tech was around like a 2-possession underdog. Villanova wins the game by 12. They're, 4 of 24 from three, and they out-rebound Texas Tech by 18, 51 to 33. So to your point, even if UConn has an off game, kind of comparison-wise, though, I do think this may be UConn's toughest matchup in the tournament just because of how explosive Illinois can be in transition if UConn's half-court offense is a little bit subpar, maybe to what we saw in the second half yesterday against San Diego State, which may in turn make this point spread a little bit inflated. But still, even if they do have your quote unquote off night, maybe like a C- game offensively, they had a C- game in the first half against San Diego State, just at the defensive end of the floor. UConn still may cover this point spread, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where we are right now, is maybe not against Purdue, maybe not against Houston, but against Illinois, who I'm not taking anything away from. They've been a fantastic team. They're riding a wave this month. They've been terrific since the postseason play started. But I still think we're at a point where UConn's B- game beats most teams' A game and beats them probably by like 6 to 10 points. Like, it's where we are. I mean, this has been a consistent thing this entire season. Teams have ebbed and flowed. Illinois has looked like a world beater one week, and they've looked like what was that a couple of other times. UConn hasn't done that this entire season. Every loss they've had, I think, has been understandable. More times than not, when they've played spotlight games, they've answered that bell and they've won handily. And then you look at, I think now, like, I fully believe in like March DNA and momentum and stuff at this point in the season. And I think you've got, while it's not the entirely same team that they had a year ago, you've got enough carryover from that squad, and you've got that belief from Danny Hurley that, like, we steamroll teams during this time of the year. Like, we did it all. We had a historically dominant run last season. We're halfway to a historically dominant run this season. And I think once you get that in your head, it does allow you to play a little bit more loose and you play more free, just feeling like no matter what we do, as long as we handle our side, we're going to win, and we're going to win handily. And I think that's what they're bringing into tomorrow's game against Illinois. And at the end of the day, like, I'm with you. Like, I think Illinois can shock the system a little bit. I think that they can do some things to put UConn on their heels at times. But like we've seen them on their heels a couple of times this season. They don't buckle. Like they don't waver. Like they always seem to have this overwhelming faith in what they do, and it's well placed faith. It's understandable faith. So I keep looking at this. I think Illinois, I won't be shocked if they get out to a nice start, get a couple of transition buckets, maybe take a lead midway through the first half or deep into the first half. Ultimately, I think that UConn's just going to keep coming, and their consistency is going to be what wins out in this game. They're just better.
Right. Yeah. My numbers make this right around, like I had on UConn -6, but I don't think I could advocate to really bet either side. I wouldn't be surprised if this one lands 7 or 8. Illinois covers. Still, UConn could very well win this game by double digits if they control the tempo like we touched on off the top. So, Mike, really quickly, any last closing betting thoughts from you on this one, whether it's side or total?
UConn. I mean, I keep saying, we talked about it on my radio show here yesterday, and people were like, I like SDSU for this reason. I was like, it's UConn. Like, it's the one bet that stood out to me yesterday, where I'm like 11.5 or whatever it wound up going off at is just not enough. If this does land at 6, 6.5, 7, 7.5, wherever, I think UConn's going to wind up winning. I'm not guaranteeing double digits, but I just think at this point, if you look at everything that we've seen in this tournament, I know Illinois has been great, but you'd be foolish not to. UConn, maybe it is a close game. Maybe they do get beat. Maybe it's a 3-point win. I'm going to have to believe it. I'm going to have to see it to believe it, because it has not happened yet. They've done whatever they've wanted against everybody they've played.
To Mike's point, or a little bit ago, maybe you will be able to get a good live number on UConn if Illinois does jump out to a first half lead. So that's worth considering as well. Now,